Well, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Mona Hilton, and today I'm honored to host a session on Do you believe in sales magic? I can tell you you're in for a real treat today because today's session is very rich in content. So take a second, congratulate yourself on carving out time to invest not only in yourself, but your teams and even your whole company. Now, you are welcome to take notes, but we will be recording today's session. So if you'd like to watch it again or you'd like to share it with a colleague, that will be available to you. We'll also have some time at the end for Q&A. So as you have questions come up, and I'm sure they will, just send them to us in the chat window on your right, and we'll be happy to address them. So, who doesn't want to believe in sales magic? Truth be told, there we go. Truth be told, doesn't this cartoon really say it all? But as you know, like in all good magic, there's a lot that happens behind the scenes. There's strategy, there's planning, there's lots of preparation and rehearsal that at the end of the day make sales growth look like it's actually magic. And that's why today I am so honored to have Dan Nelson as our guest. Dan is truly a sales guru, as you're about to see. But what I admire most about Dan, getting to know him, is that he doesn't just speak from theory or philosophy. He speaks solidly on practical results. He doesn't just talk the talk, he walks the walk. Dan actually has a proven track record of going into organization after organization and doubling or more their sales revenues using much of the sales strategies you're about to hear about today. So he speaks from experience, not just ideology. So with that, let me hand the baton, no pun intended, over to Dan, and let's jump into today's topic. Dan?
Thanks, Mona. And good afternoon to all of our guests on the East Coast and the Midwest, and good morning to those of you who are joining us from out west. Our webinar today is let me just back up. Sorry about that, I got too excited with my mouse. Our webinar today is titled, Do You Believe in Sales Magic? I can assure you that this webinar is not about pulling rabbits out of hats. What I can share with you is that in this session, we will talk about putting a little science into the art of selling. As the head of this slide says, do you know what the greatest trick in sales is? It is, and always has been, converting leads into orders. Anyone who's ever spent any time in sales knows that. The question is, what really happens from the time a lead comes in until an order is taken? To get to that answer, I always like to do a little test. It's one I've done many times in the past. I will ask some reps in the room what turns leads into orders. Let me tell you, at least half of them will say magic. But if I was to ask that same question to some consultants, none of them would give me the answer magic, but the majority would probably answer sales process. So who do you think's right? The truth is they both are. Anyone who's been in sales for more than a year or so could tell you plenty of stories about a time when they did everything right. They took the sales training seriously. They implemented the tactics that they learned with precision. They researched their client extensively. They asked all the right questions, and they still lost the deal. On the flip side of the coin, they probably have one or two stories about occasions when they weren't really at the top of their game, and yet magically had received the order from the buyer. So even the staunchest supporter of the sales process would have to admit that the supernatural seems to slip its way into sales at times. So what does this all mean? What am I trying to get at? Do you throw away your process models and Replace it with white gloves and a wand like we saw on the opening slide? I don't think so. As long as you know there will always be factors beyond your control, it's still wise to move forward with a more formal sales process to increase your predictability and your likelihood of success. Typically, sales managers are looking at two things when they're working with their sales reps in either a coaching session or in a sales meeting. They're looking at results and they're looking at activity, and usually in that order. What they're really interested in is whether there's enough revenue streaming in to keep the doors open and the lights on. But results are a trailing or a lagging indicator. And by that I mean you don't know what the results are until after they're done. It doesn't matter whether it's a month or a quarter. It's too late because that period has already ended. To get it ahead of the curve, activity management has become a favorite mechanism for sales managers in order to get a handle not on how we've done, but on how we're going to do. In this way, activity management provides a leading indicator. Sales meeting discussions then sound something like this, where the sales manager is standing in front of the team and proclaims, last quarter we came in at 110% of quota. That's terrific. However, last quarter we were averaging 20 calls a week. In the first 3 weeks of this quarter, we've only averaged 10 calls a week. I want to see us get our call volume up, and I'm thinking about running a sales blitz early next month to help us do that. The equation for this, the harder I work, the luckier I get philosophy is capital A equals capital P, or activity equals productivity. And the underlying philosophy is big activity equals big productivity. Yet anyone who's ever participated in the Sales Blitz program or any other attempt to boost activity has seen the following results, where capital A equals small p. That is, there was lots of activity, but very little in the way of results. This suggests that something else is going on. Namely, that's the quality of the activity. So the new equation might look like activity times quality equals productivity. The question then becomes, how do we define quality in sales? That's where sales process comes into play. Let's look at the most basic process model that I have on the next slide. What this first model depicts is an arrow going into a box. I'll call that input. And an arrow coming out of the box, and we'll call that output. To the extent that the outputs differ from the inputs, something happened inside that box. And that something is what I label process. Besides enabling us consultants to make a living with simplistic charts like this, there is a second use for this model when we apply it to sales, as shown in this next figure. We now see leads as the inputs and orders as the outputs. And that process that's taking place in the middle is your pipeline. Leads being generated by marketing, the selling process being handled by sales, and orders being supported by customer service. This entire model has come from the world of manufacturing, where quality assurance controls the inputs, manufacturing controls the environment and the process, and as a result, the outputs can be much more closely controlled or predicted. In fact, this is what the whole quality movement in manufacturing was all about, implementing and then improving process control. However, this metaphor can only be extended so far in the world of sales. In sales, we don't do a very good job of controlling inputs or leads. We rarely control the selling environment because the truth of the matter is there are really two processes going on. There's a selling process and a buying process. Furthermore, In any given sales opportunity, you can still do everything right and lose the sale, or in some cases do everything wrong and still have the order awarded to you. That's where the magic comes in. The question that I would propose to you to consider for your own sales operations are these. A, could we have a little more process and a little less magic? And B, is there a legitimate reason for doing so? I think the answer to both of these questions is yes, absolutely. This sales model is the basis for a pretty good start, but you'll want to add a few more details to make it operationally useful. Right now, all you can say about any specific deal in the pipeline, it's a lead, or it's in the pipeline, or it's closed. More to the point, for any deal in the pipeline, all you can say, and what I most often hear from sales reps is, it hasn't closed yet. So the question that I would ask a sales rep is, what's your buyer doing throughout this entire process? If you think back to the previous slide, the image presented a very mechanical model. Leads in, orders out. For sales reps, converting leads into orders isn't as robotic as that image indicates, which is why I always tell sales professionals there'll always be a place in this world for you. There are milestones or steps that you take from start to finish in any sales process. Plus, there are post-sale actions outside of the traditional sales process, such as delivery, installation, implementation, and customer care. This selling process is vastly improved by adding steps to the model. I'm always shocked at the number of companies that I've worked with that have not bothered to document what steps 1 through N are for their own business. Truth be known, there can be different processes for different sales. An example that I would share with you is there's a process for new business versus renewal business. Different process for product sales versus service contracts. Companies that I have worked with that have delineated their process steps usually have gone on to define their own seller actions at each step. This is useful, but falls short of an equally important component, and that is identifying the buyer actions at each step to advance the sale. You might say, Dan, why bother? The answer is that as a seller, I can virtually do all of the actions from step 1 through step N by myself. In fact, I can do everything by myself except close the opportunity. However, the true test of the progress you're making towards successfully closing an opportunity is what the buyer is doing to advance the sale. Knowing what buyer actions translate into forward motion is worth defining and tracking. Here is one of my favorite stories. Were you ever involved in a large deal where you brought in a lot of resources to do a customer presentation at their site? Brought together for this event was the sales rep. Maybe you brought in a subject matter expert. Possibly you might have even invited in the sales VP representing your management team to show commitment. Probably you flew in the night before. You might have developed a detailed agenda and rehearsed it the following day. At the prospect's office the next morning, your primary contact meets you outside the conference room and says, "Hey, great to see you guys. I see you have your team here and you're ready to go." He goes on and says, "You guys are going to do great. Come on in and get set up while we take a moment and take a short break." And then comes that dreaded pause. "Oh, one more thing. So-and-so couldn't make it today, but you guys are still going to do great." Oh, of course, so-and-so is the reason you brought your entire team to the meeting. Has that ever happened to you? If so, you did what you were supposed to do, but your buying influence didn't do their part. It is likely that you even had suspicions before you got on the plane that this was not teed up properly. In this scenario, let's look at what typical buyer actions would be to identify and allow you to converse with the key players by phone before the meeting so that you could tailor your presentation to their concerns and needs. If there was not a discussion with so-and-so in advance, then there should at least been phone meetings with his or her direct reports, identifying the key needs and objectives for the meeting. The true aha moment comes with this fact. It's not enough to know what you're going to do during the sales process. You must also know what your buyer is doing and thinking. When I started this presentation, I started discussing about magic. Now I'm talking about mind reading. I'm again delving into the world of the supernatural. Similar though to my stance on magic, I'm not supporting that you go out and purchase a crystal ball. I do, however, advocate for mapping out the buyer's process to provide yourself with a clear estimation of where they should be at each stage of the sales process. This way you know immediately when they fall out of line, rather than realizing a deal is dead on arrival only after it's too late. This slide starts with winning sales teams know when to lose. I've always been a big believer in selling that if you're going to lose, lose fast. Let me share a basketball story with you to make my point. June 19, 2016. 44.5 million viewers tuned in to Game 7 of the NBA Finals to watch the Cavaliers win their first NBA championship against the Golden State Warriors. And the Warriors lost a heartbreaker. Warrior fans wept. Players were at a loss for words. One media outlet even declared the Warriors' 73 regular season wins meaningless. But we all know sports teams lose all the time. So what made this loss so devastating? It's because it came so late in the season. By the time Game 7 came around, fans had spent huge sums of money on tickets and gear, not to mention hours watching late-night games. With ticket prices as high as $25,000 for the final game alone, fans were expecting a big win as a return on their investment. Until that point, they had been rewarded with league records and celebrations galore. But when the final buzzer sounded, it had all been for naught. Even if you don't know Steph Curry or LeBron James, I bet you could identify with those fans' feelings if you've worked in sales. Losing at the last minute is definitely more painful than losing in the early stages of the sales process. If a deal is going to end in a loss or a no decision, it's better to come to this conclusion before your time, money, and other resources have been wasted. Even worse, when you lose late, you've now missed opportunities that could have potentially been major wins had you devoted the proper time and money to those other opportunities. Shown at the bottom of this pipeline is a diagram with two sales reps' fallout patterns. That is the steps at which each has opportunities to part the pipeline and not become business for their company. I labeled Rep A in blue and Rep B in red. They each started at the beginning of the period with 100 opportunities in their pipeline, and they each successfully closed 40 of those deals. Their close rates are identical, but are their results and cost of sales the same? Would you prefer one rep's fallout pattern over the others? Most managers would recognize that Rep B's pattern is preferable to Rep A's. The reason is the wasted time and resources that go into pursuing each lost opportunity. So if you're going to lose it, better to lose it fast and early on. But that doesn't really go far enough either. Typically, the later sales steps are more expensive and time-consuming than the earlier steps in the sales process. So the advantage is much more to Rep B than Rep A in reducing cost of sales. So if you looked at my pattern here, Rep B, of the 60 deals that didn't turn into wins, 25 and 20 happened in step 1 and 2. Whereas if you were looking at Rep A, he lost 45 deals very, very late in the process. However, all these numbers pale in the face of the opportunity cost represented by the deals Rep A is not going after while continuing to invest in opportunities that will eventually be lost. This is a huge difference. We've been talking a lot about sales process, but now I'd like to switch gears for a second. One of my beliefs is that one of the most important decisions that we make as managers and leaders is how we connect with our customers. I would like to introduce you to the 5 levels of sales relationships. The best way to visualize this is to think of it as a pyramid divided into 5 levels. At the bottom of the pyramid is what I refer to the status of being an approved vendor. Next up in the pyramid, you become a preferred supplier. Then a sales consultant, a strategic contributor, and at the top of the pyramid, you're considered a partner. You can also think of partner as a trusted advisor. That's a term that's come in vogue in, just recently. The center of gravity in our pyramid is right above the preferred supplier line. There are many companies below the center of gravity as there are above it. And trust me, you don't want to be below that center of gravity. When you start developing stronger relationships with your customers, you start moving up the pyramid. And then you start reaping the benefits from your efforts. As you move up the pyramid, trust and access increase. Also, as increasing is the number of contacts you have in each and every account. Your knowledge of the business and of your customer's customer increases. You also likely begin receiving more referrals, references, and repeat business. And tell me, who doesn't want that? There are also aspects of the process that decrease as you move up through the levels of relationships. At the bottom of the pyramid, you're competing with everyone. But at the top, you probably have little or no competition at all. At the same time, your time to close decreases. The sales cycle time shrinks, and you likely benefit from more add-on business. And there's one last added benefit when you reach the top of the pyramid. It's no longer about what you're selling, but about how you're selling it. As your knowledge of the business increases, what you bring to the table is more important than the products or services that you're selling. As you create stronger and deeper relations with your customers, all sorts of good things begin to accrue. Trust increases, and that gives you added credibility. Close time shrinks, and your customers start to see you as a partner. So here's a new way to look at this. As a vendor, it's all about transactions. You're one of many. You have some goods and services that customers need, and that's really just the price of admission. Doing business at this level is rapid, repetitive, and routine, and it's begging for technology. And here's what I mean by that. If you need cash, you don't stand in line at the bank anymore. You go to an ATM, or you might even pay with your phone. Technology is constantly eroding the base of the pyramid because it fits that transactional model better. At the top level, at the partner level, it's all about interactions. It's complex, it's proactive. You have an opportunity to be creative because you've earned the trust of your customers. And think about the kind of impact that can have. Now excuse me, I just had to grab a little bit of water. Now let me pull this all together. We've discussed different levels of sales relationships, and we went over sales processes in great detail. I call the combination of these concepts the sales relationship process matrix. The 5 levels of the sales relationships are listed on the vertical axis of the matrix. Along the bottom of this matrix are 4 levels of sales process. Companies either have random or informal, formal, or dynamic type processes. Over the years, we have found that companies adopt one of the following 4 levels of process. Level 1 companies have what I refer to as a random process. Their sales reps tend to view themselves as CEOs of their own businesses. By that I mean they're all out there doing their own thing. These companies and their reps are utmost anti-process. Being a level 1 organization does not mean you're unsuccessful, but it does mean your results are unpredictable. Level 2 organizations have what I refer to as an informal process. At this level, I see firms that rely on an informal approach to selling, which their salespeople are exposed to as a sales process, but the formality of the implementation stops there. Sales reps may be expected to adopt the selling approach, but its use is not monitored nor measured. These companies are essentially driven by tribal knowledge. That is, if we keep doing the perceived best practices of the past, we will keep hitting our numbers in the future. These types of companies can be successful as well, but only as long as there are no major changes in their marketplace. Level 3 companies have adopted a formal process. A level 3 organization is one where the sales process has become a way of life for the company. Every employee in sales, as well as marketing and support, is trained on the standard for how things need to be done. Not just the recommended way of doing things, but the required way to do them. This process is continually reinforced by management, who use the process as the framework for coaching and mentoring reps, as well as managing deals through the various stages of the sales pipeline. And finally, level 4 organizations have what I refer to as a dynamic process. Level 4 is where we all want to be. The firm at this level not only has adopted a formal sales process, but these companies are also committed to gathering and continually analyzing metrics about their performance. They have a solid understanding of how they sell, how their customers buy, and how they need to engage with clients to create long-term loyalty. Level 4 firms are constantly questioning the status quo. They're proactively making changes to how they sell to create an advantage over their less nimble competitors. Our analysis showed that as companies moved up the levels of sales process, sales performance and sales predictability increased significantly. What I'd like to do is share with you some numbers from the 2018 Sales Performance Study completed by CSO Insights. I've always loved this quote from Edward Demings, the father of our quality movement back in the 60s. The fact that you have an opinion doesn't make you wrong, but without data, it's hard to prove that you are right. As I said earlier, these metrics that I'm sharing with you are from the 2018 CSO Insights Sales Performance Study. You'll see I use 6 metrics on the left-hand side of this slide to assess how successful a sales organization is. What we are looking at is 1, what percentage of their reps are making quota. 2, what percent of these companies are achieving their overall revenue plan. 3, what percentage of their forecast deals are they winning, losing, or deals are ending up in no decisions. And finally, the last factor is sales force turnover, which includes both voluntary and involuntary. As you can see, level 2 companies outperform on average level 1 organizations, and level 3 companies on average outperform level 2 companies. So basically, the higher up and the further over the right you get to in the SRP matrix, the more likely it is you're going to have successful operational metrics. Let me wrap up this webinar with some of our 5 beliefs at Suncoast Partners with regards to sales process and sales relationship. The first, as I stated earlier, the most important decision we make as salespeople, managers and leaders, is how do we connect with our customers? Is it going to be an approved vendor relationship, preferred supplier, sales consultant, strategic contributor, or trusted partner? Obviously, no one can begin at the top of that pyramid, but you certainly want to begin somewhere north of just being an approved vendor. Our second belief is sales talent is important, but a scalable, consistent selling process and methodology is everything. Our third belief is today customers expect a perspective, not a sales pitch. And I define perspective as being able to share with your customers and prospects what you know, what you've experienced, what you're thinking, what you believe, and communicate all of that with passion. And finally, our last 2 beliefs, the best are always looking for ways to improve. Those that prepare win more and win more consistently. That concludes my presentation this afternoon. I'd like to turn it back over to Mona. We'll be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Wow, Dan, thank you. I told you that was going to be content rich. I mean, my mind is swirling with all the different ideas. And honestly, Dan, you probably could spend days unpacking this for us in great detail to give it the attention it deserves. One of the things that just really struck me is the concepts are so rich and they're so deep, but they would translate very differently for different industries. So if you're in healthcare services or product sales or services sales or technology sales or pharma or even senior services, you can take these concepts and apply them slightly differently, but the basic foundational strategies are the same. Really good stuff. Like I said, my mind is just swirling. A few things that I wrote down I just want to kind of hit again to highlight is one of them was to lose early and lose fast. I don't know about the rest of you guys, but for me, that kind of hit home. How many times have we spent days, months, sometimes even years pursuing what we thought was a valid opportunity that truth is it really wasn't a legitimate opportunity to begin with. It was more of a suspect than a prospect. And we spent a lot of time, like Dan said, we spent a lot of money, especially near the end of it, and there was really never any chance of getting that sale. So it's so important to do that discovery and do the exploratory process early on and identify if they're not really good opportunities to go ahead and let them go early. Save you a lot of grief and disappointment at the end. Another thing was our relationship with our prospects and our clients. Are we just a vendor? I don't know about you, but I hate that term. Or are we a consultant? Or are we a partner? What is our relationship? One way to test that we use is if our clients call us to solve problems, we know we're moving up that relationship scale. We don't want to be a vendor because then we can be easily replaced. But having that relationship and developing a culture of growing that relationship, not just with prospects, but also with our customers, that was really good. And, of course, the process and having processes in place, creating these well-designed processes really do have the power to make our sales success look like magic. We all know better, but I actually have a saying that you can only duplicate your success if you can replicate your process. And that's where we at Advantage Anywhere can help. That's what we do. Once you have that process established, the big hurdle then is to make sure that your people and your teams and your company are following that same process day in, day out, every time, regardless of who is doing the steps. Sometimes we refer to that as following the yellow brick road to success. And then, of course, like Dan mentioned, you've got to manage those numbers carefully to ensure that you're getting the results that you expect to see, and that you can see problems ahead of time and address them before they become real issues. That's how you avoid what we call the oh shoot moment. You know that oh shoot moment when you wake up in the middle of the night realizing that there's something critical that you've overlooked or you've missed or a step that you've skipped. That's no fun. So what Advantage Anywhere does is it automates those processes, those workflows, your sales, so that you can, to the extent that's possible, of course, like Dan said, there's some supernatural intervention there sometimes as well, but so that you can get that sustainable, predictable results and consistently high sales numbers regardless of what you're selling. So if you would like to learn more about Dan or you'd like to engage with him, maybe have a discussion with him, kind of dig deeper with him, or with us at Advantage Anywhere, we'd both be delighted to connect with you. Our contact information is on the screen. So while you're jotting down that information, let's see what questions have come in while we're on the call. Bear with me as I look. All right, so Dan, I've got one for you.
Okay.
So you talk a little bit about perspective. Tell us a little bit more. The question is, how do you describe perspective?
I got an equation for perspective, Mona. And perspective to me equals your expertise, your education, your communication, collaboration, and passion. It's really what I believe, what you know, what you've experienced, what you think, what you believe, and how you bring new ideas to the client that they haven't thought about in the past. The reason I talk about perspective so much is that most prospects today, before they even talk to a sales rep, have been out on the internet and have done their research on your product and your company, have read blogs, have read user comments. So when you show up at their site, they pretty much know as much about your product as you do. And what they're really looking for is how you can help them solve their pain or their issues. And that's where I think perspective comes in very huge in the selling process today.
So it sounds like it's a lot about what you bring to the table. It's what differentiates you from that vendor level that we were talking about earlier, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's good. Got another question here. It's actually for me, and it says we already have, I'm going to skip the name, XYZ CRM. Is that sufficient? Well, first of all, congratulations for having a CRM. That's obviously a good thing, and it's a great start. The challenge that we have found with CRMs, and the reason actually that we designed and developed and built Advantage Anywhere, is that a couple of things. One is CRMs are kind of like driving forward while looking in your rearview mirror. They can tell you what happened in the past, and some of them are pretty good at analyzing historical data, but they don't do anything to nudge you forward, to follow that yellow brick road to success that I mentioned earlier. And a lot of times the CRMs, the legacy CRMs that are out there, how do I say this? Adoption rates are low because people don't want to use them. They often view them as big brother tools. They often view them as more trouble than they're worth, so they don't put notes in there, which is really just the beginning. And they don't rely on them to help them. They see them more as a hindrance than a help. And so, again, that's why we did Advantage Anywhere. That's why we built in what we affectionately call nudge campaigns to nudge you through the behaviors that you need to do to be successful. and built things like the voice-driven, the world's first voice-driven business productivity assistant that we call Abby, so that you can actually speak to her. She speaks back to you. She is a little sassy, I'll warn you, but she'll also dictate your notes. She'll fulfill things for you and that kind of thing. So that, speaking of perspective, that kind of changes the dynamic that people have with their system or their CRM, if you want to use that term, so that it's actually more of an assistant than a big brother. So I'd love to chat with you more about that if you're interested. Our contact information is on the screen. Let me look to see if there's any other questions. I don't see any other ones. Feel free to reach out to us if you do have any questions that you'd like to ask privately. But I think that really kind of wraps it up for today. I want to thank you, Dan. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate just your wealth of knowledge and information and wisdom. And I'm grateful that you are willing to share that with us and our audience today. Thank you so much, Dan. And I also want to thank you for joining us in today's session, Do You Believe in Sales Magic? We look forward to connecting you. So until next time, on behalf, I believe, of both Dan and myself, we wish you a very great day and great sales success. Go out and prosper. Thanks so much, guys. Take care.